Good day, everyone. This is going to be our first overview lecture of Unit 1. We're going to talk a little bit about the engineering profession. In fact, the first question I would ask you is, why are you taking this course at all? And the answer to that is, we're taking it because engineering is a profession. So we want to talk a little bit today about how that came about. So in doing that, we're going to talk about the history of engineering, and then the structure of the associations that guide engineering, some details about licensing, and then finish off with the accreditation process. So let's ask the question, what is engineering anyways? Well, Mark Twain tried a kind of a funny definition. An engineer is a person who can build for a dime, but any damn fool can build for a dollar. And I like that definition because it builds in the concept of economy, which is important. Engineers build things. That's really important, that people want to use. And we want to make sure that people like the objects that we create, that we produce them at a good price, and that we do no harm to people, that we are very safe in our construction. So for example, compare software engineering with computer science. A computer scientist is only concerned about writing the most perfect program, where a software engineer is much more concerned about whether that program meets the needs of the user and doesn't hurt her. Okay, the history of engineering is quite old. As we know, the Romans were superb engineers, and that's basically about 2,000 years ago. The Greeks were good engineers. Persians built great bridges. The Hellespont, for example, around 500 BC. Engineer comes from the Latin ingenium, which means cleverness, intelligence, genius. I like that definition. The first engineers were obviously civil engineers, and then naval engineers, and then military engineers. In fact, were developed as assists to the armies. It's just one of the reasons the Romans were so successful. Engineering was basically came of age during the 19th century, during the Industrial Revolution. And in fact, the Industrial Revolution was fueled by engineers. And the concept of regulation started to become quite important because the general public realized that if we had bad engineering, people could be killed. But how do we tell if we have good engineering or bad engineering? So a very simple example is the question of high-pressure boilers. James Watt invented those in the late 1700s. He wouldn't build high-pressure boilers because they blew up. And in fact, in the 19th century, 40,000 deaths at least were attributed to exploding high-pressure boilers. Well, the public wouldn't put up with this, so this led to the development of thermodynamics, better metallurgical engineering, and by the beginning of the 20th century, nobody died from exploding boilers. Well, the first thing we tried, building on the experience of the Middle Ages, was to use apprenticeship programs, but that's too slow and it doesn't scale particularly well. So let's take a look at a case study number 2, a tale of 2 Canadian bridges. Here's bridge number 1. What a mess. It collapsed, killing about 200 people. And here, if we look at it today, it wasn't that it was impossible to build the bridge. We just had bad engineering when it was built. And in fact, the bridge was completed 10 years later by Canadian engineers. And here's bridge number 2. Never collapsed. It was built on time and on schedule. A beautiful bridge spanning the Northumberland Straits. Well, here's 2 examples of good and bad engineering. Well, one of the aftermaths of the Quebec Bridge is we realized we had to somehow regulate the profession of engineering. Now let's define what we mean by a profession, and this needs to be articulated clearly. It's a self-selected, self-disciplined group of people who hold themselves out to the public as possessing a special skill derived from training and education and are prepared to exercise that skill in the interest of others. That's a legal definition. It also has to be a law. It has to be illegal to practice engineering badly unless you're certified, and we need a law to back that up. Today it's the case that you have to be a graduate of an accredited engineering program, primarily at a university. Now, why do we need regulation? Well, first of all, the protection of the public. We need to guarantee quality. Now, it's not a guarantee that we won't fail, but it's a guarantee that we have the best skills that we know up to that time. And in fact, engineers learn from failure, not success. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge or the Challenger disasters teach us lessons so we don't make those mistakes again. Whenever a plane crashes, for example, in the old days, we know some aeronautical engineer made a mistake. Today, it's a software engineer. Okay, don't forget, doctors kill their patients one at a time, but we engineers, we can kill them by the thousands. So we have a moral imperative to make sure we don't do that. Now, we need a definition of professional engineering, and according to the Professional Engineers of Ontario, designing, composing, evaluating, advising, reporting, directing, or supervising, or safeguarding the life, property, and health of the public is paramount. The authority for this is each local jurisdiction, such as the province of Ontario, controls engineering in that jurisdiction. In Ontario, it's the Professional Engineering Act of a few years ago, administered by the PEO, Professional Engineers of Ontario. Now, this vehicle, any licensed member can belong to the PEO, and its principal objective is to regulate the professional engineering. Now, how is one licensed? Well, to do that, you've got to graduate from an accredited, mark that word, accredited engineering program. You have to be a Canadian, proficient in English, of good character, and worked as an engineer in training for at least 4 years. Then you have to pass a professional practice exam, which is very much like the final exam you're going to do in this course. The legal authority comes from the Legislature of Ontario, specifically the Professional Engineering Act of 84, 90, and 2011. Those are minor details. Now, professional misconduct means that if an engineer makes a mistake, the PEO can discipline that member for doing something wrong. And here are about 10 or 11 things that can go wrong. I'm just going to go over them quickly because we don't have a lot of time, and we'll expand them later in the other lectures. But there are about 13 or 14 things here that we can be disciplined for. Important thing to understand about discipline is that if you make a mistake, the PEO can fine you, they can send you to jail, they can take away your professional engineer designation, and make sure you never practice again. The PEO has a discipline committee that handles its internal affairs. Remember, engineers are self-regulating, so the discipline committee regulates the rest of us. Finally, the accreditation process is basically a process whereby a group of engineers comes to a university and looks at the engineering course that we have in place, like software engineering, for example, or civil engineering. And they make sure they go through every course that we give and make sure that we do the proper best practices that one would do in that particular discipline. And then you can be accredited for up to 6 years, and after 6 years you have to be reaccredited again. The result of all of this is that all the 40 programs in universities in Canada are roughly the same. They're all of very good quality because they're regularly checked, unlike most other university programs. Now, the result of accreditation is that in those 40 universities, we have 80 accredited programs in Canada. There are hundreds of thousands of professional engineers in Canada that monitor themselves. And our accreditation program we're really proud of because it's the best in the world, and in fact it's been exported to other countries. Finally, we conclude by saying this is what we want. We want this on the left-hand side and not this on the right-hand side. And accreditation and the professionalization of engineers leads to that result. So to do a wrap, engineering is a profession. The quality and the goodness of it is self-measured by ourselves, the people in that organization, and we maintain our discipline to make sure that people do the proper job. They're legally obligated to perform engineering to the best of their ability. Otherwise, they can be sued. We'll talk about that later in the course. They can be fined a lot of money, even imprisoned if they really do something badly, or they can be removed altogether from the profession. And the rest of this course is going to be an expansion of these themes, and here are the other 11 units that we're going to cover in the next several weeks. Thanks for your attention.